Have you ever wondered what happens when an elevator skips your floor? I found out the hard way. The familiar low hum of the motor was a lullaby after a long day at the office. The fluorescent light hummed above, flickering ever so slightly in that way that always promised to give me a headache, but never quite delivered. I leaned against the cool metal wall, my eyes closing in tired anticipation of the 7th floor chime. But the elevator kept going. The gentle ascent turned into a strange, weightless glide. I opened my eyes just as the numbers on the panel glitched. They didn't just skip. They became a chaotic smear of lines and symbols like a corrupted video file. The floor indicator didn't show. 7 or 8 or 9, it showed nothing. The low hum of the motor changed pitch, becoming a high whining drone, and the fluorescent light above began to strobe. Faster and faster, a disorienting flash that made my stomach churn. The world outside the elevator doors, visible through the small glass pane, was no longer the familiar shaft of concrete and steel. It was a blur of grays and blacks, a landscape of geometric impossible shapes that twisted and folded in on themselves. A suffocating sense of displacement settled over me. I wasn't in my building anymore. The thought was a cold stone dropping into a pit of dread. The elevator shuddered, a rattling groan from a sick old machine, before the strobe light vanished and the doors slid open. They revealed a hallway I had never seen before, and a dimension I could never have imagined. The air hit me first. It was heavy and damp, smelling of forgotten things, mold, ozone, and the coppery tang of old blood. The lights were a series of dim, exposed bulbs, each one buzzing with the frantic, terminal energy of a dying insect, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch. The wallpaper was peeling in long, curling strips like the skin of a snake, and beneath it, faint, grotesque patterns were visible. Not flowers or geometric designs, but faces, smudged, silent. Screaming faces that seemed to shift in the periphery of my vision. I should have stepped back. I should have pressed the emergency button, or the 7, or any button at all, even though they were all dark. My mind screamed at me to retreat, to curl up in the relative safety of the elevator car. But something else was at play. A subtle, almost magnetic force was pulling me forward. Not a physical tug, but an internal compulsion. A curiosity that felt like a parasite burrowing into my will. Every door in that hallway was shut. They were all identical. Featureless slabs of wood painted a sickly institutional beige, all except one. At the very end of the hall, barely visible in the gloom, a single door was slightly ajar. Not just open, but ajar by a precise, unnerving 2 inches, as if it had been waiting for me. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a hollow drum in the oppressive silence. The sound of my own footsteps on the grimy linoleum floor echoed too loudly, as if the hallway itself was amplifying the noise, demanding I continue. When my fingers finally brushed the doorknob, it was warm, too warm. A visceral, living heat, as if someone, or something, had just released their grip and was watching me from the shadows. The door creaked open, its groan a long, drawn-out sigh. It revealed not an apartment or a room, but another elevator. This one was ancient, a relic from a different century. Its metal gates were made of rusted, crisscrossed iron, and its interior reeked of motor oil, decay, and a cold, metallic sorrow. The air inside was still and heavy. Through the bars, I could see the bare concrete of the shaft falling away into an abyss of blackness. The rattling sound I had heard was not random. It was a rhythmic clang, a deliberate pulse coming from somewhere deep within the shaft. A sound that vibrated through the floor and up into my very bones, syncing with my frantic heartbeat. It was the sound of something immense and powerful, moving and breathing in the darkness below. My feet were rooted to the spot. My conscious mind screamed that this was a trap, a dead end. But just as I began to back away, the floor beneath me groaned. A deep tectonic rumble shook the air. I looked behind me and saw the hallway I had just traversed begin to collapse. The ceiling tore open like a wound. Lights exploded in bursts of blinding white, and the walls crumbled into dust, devoured by an encroaching darkness that consumed matter and light with equal ferocity. I had no choice. It was the abyss behind me or the unknown ahead. I lunged into the old elevator, slamming the rattling iron gate shut, just as the hallway disappeared entirely into a silent, devouring void. The floor of the elevator lurched violently as if falling into a hole of its own. I turned to the control panel, desperate for an escape, but there were no buttons, no numbers. Just one, a small black unmarked keyhole. Intricate, yes, but empty. A mocking void. As I stared at it, a faint, sickly green light pulsed from within. The elevator jerked again, a more violent final movement, and then began descending on its own. The rhythmic clanging from below now louder, closer. It was a countdown. The numbers on the small, flickering display above the gate began to flash. But this time, they weren't numbers. They were names. Names I didn't recognize at first. A blur of foreign, unreadable text. Then I began to see names that were familiar. Old acquaintances, high school friends I had lost touch with, family members long since passed. They scrolled down faster and faster. A macabre roulette wheel of the lost and forgotten. I watched, my heart hammering in my throat, as the list of names accelerated until one stopped. My own name, my full name, in a stark white font against the black screen. The elevator screeched to a halt. The sound like nails on a chalkboard, and the gates groaned open. I was standing in a perfect, unsettling replica of my apartment. The same minimalist couch, the same coffee table with the wobbly leg, the same pile of junk mail on the counter. Even the same unwashed coffee mug left on the table that morning was there. But it wasn't mine, because sitting on the couch, perfectly still, was me. This version of me didn't look surprised. He smiled. A slow, unnerving smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold and they held the patient, knowing look of a predator who had been waiting for a very long time. I froze, my every instinct screaming at me to run. My double stood up, moving with a fluid grace that was both familiar and alien, and walked toward me. He stopped just inches away, his cold breath ghosting over my ear as he whispered, "This elevator, it only stops for people who are already lost. You're not from here. You belong to us now." As he spoke, I noticed a subtle wrongness about the apartment. Before I could react, before my mind could process the chilling implication of his words, he shoved me back inside the ancient elevator. I stumbled backward, the cold metal gate slamming shut behind me with a final echoing clang, and the elevator dropped again. I screamed as the elevator fell, faster and faster with no end in sight. The air was a tangible pressure, a weight crushing against my chest, making it impossible to breathe. The reflection in the metal walls of the elevator twisted and warped, no longer a simple distortion. My face melted, eyes stretched like taffy, and my features contorted into shapes I didn't recognize. A gallery of horrifying, impossible faces that were, in some fundamental way, still me. I saw my reflection with a different nose, different hair, eyes that were a different color. A mosaic of what-ifs, a kaleidoscope of every version of me that had never come to be. I saw myself as a homeless man, a billionaire, a faceless corpse, and a laughing child, all of them screaming as they fell. But the screams were soundless. They were coming from me, from all of my possible selves, trapped in this single, final moment of terror. They all looked at me with the same cold, knowing expression as my double, all of them silent, smiling. It was as if every choice I had ever made, every path I had not taken, was now a specter in the walls of this plummeting cage. And then, with a jarring, absolute suddenness, it stopped. The doors groaned open once more, and I braced myself for the next horror. But what I saw waiting for me this time wasn't a hallway or an apartment. It was a vast, silent auditorium. Rows and rows of people stretching as far as the eye could see, all sitting motionless in old wooden chairs. Every single one of them looked exactly like me. They were all wearing the same clothes. Their expressions were identical, a tranquil, empty serenity that was more terrifying than any scream. They turned their heads in unison, like puppets on a single string, their movements slow and perfectly synchronized. Then as one, they began to rise. The sound of thousands of chairs scraping against the floor filled the air, a single horrifying sound. Times, a cold, porcelain mask of contentment. Their eyes, my eyes, were empty of all life, all thought, all emotion. Just waiting. And as I stood there frozen, the single, collective voice of 1,000 echoes whispered, "Welcome home, brother." I don't know if I'll ever get back to the real world. I'm still here, in the cold, dusty elevator, the doors open to an audience of my own, empty duplicates. The air is still, silent, waiting. But if you're hearing this, don't ever trust an elevator that doesn't stop at the right floor. It's not just a mechanical error. It's a door to a place you weren't meant to be. A trap set for the lost and the curious. And they have been waiting a very long time.